Hello everyone, I have a massive video in store for you today, and I've got a ton of videos planned throughout December to close out 2018. Hopefully I can get them all done. With my schedule being what it is, it's going to be very hard, but and I do want to take my traditional end of the year holiday break. So hopefully all the videos I have planned, I can knock them all out the weekend before Christmas by the latest. So fingers crossed, here's hoping I get them all done. But just to give you an idea of the videos I have planned, there's going to be part 4 of my Kaiju review series, which would be me closing up on the Toho classics, focusing very heavily on Mothra. My last Star Wars review of the year will be posted. Again, fingers crossed on this one. I'm going to try and get this one done. My top 20 favorite episodes of He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, the original Filmation show. I'm working on that one right now, and I hope to God I can get that one done, because that one's been over a year in the making. I've been promising that one for a really long time, and I have not delivered yet, so hopefully I can get that one done. And on the wrestling side of things, I want to do a best and worst of 2018. I also want to do previews and reviews for the various shows that are coming up over the next couple of weeks. And yeah, and obviously today's video is going to be very wrestling centric. So a lot of things. So I'm actually combining 2 videos here, what I originally had planned. You're going to get a what went wrong with the X Division to celebrate the history of TNA / Impact Wrestling, who's having their homecoming pay-per-view very early in January of next year. So I wanted to do an Impact Wrestling centric what went wrong right before that show, just to be a dick. Also, I've got the top 10 matches for November 2018. That will be in this video, and also previews and predictions for 2 upcoming pay-per-views: ROH Final Battle 2018 and WWE TLC 2018. So a lot of stuff to cover here. Now, like I said, I'm in the process of buying a home. I've settled on a condo that I will be moving into. We should be closing by December 27th. But there is what can best be described as a shit ton of paperwork to finalize that. So anyone who is a homeowner, like it's a long and arduous process, so we're in the middle of that right now, and that's taking up a lot of my time. I also have a business trip to go on. I'm going to be in Tampa for most of next week. From Sunday to Wednesday, I'm going to be in Tampa, so that's going to cut into my video making as well for the business trip that I'm doing. So, but I'm still going to try and knock all these videos out. So again, fingers crossed, and here's hoping we can close out 2018 very strong for this channel with some good content that you guys enjoy. But now that I've got the introductions out of the way, let's go right into the what went wrong. And when you think back on the history of TNA, Impact Wrestling, Global Force, whatever the fuck you want to call them, one thing that really stands out as a major positive in the eyes of the fans, and even some of their critics, is the X Division. That was something that gave them their identity very early on. It was something that was a breeding ground for great talents, such as AJ Styles, who was the icon of the X Division, the Fallen Angel Christopher Daniels, Samoa Joe, Low Key, the Amazing Red, Jerry Lynn, who had one of the last really great runs of his career as being one of the veterans to be featured in the X Division. Chris Sabin was another great one. Just so many guys and so many great talents that were showcased in the X Division that critics and fans alike both agreed that the X Division was part of what gave Impact Wrestling its unique identity, especially at a time when WCW was gone, so there was no Cruiserweight division. ECW was gone, so you couldn't have the Super Crazies or anything like that. And WWE was just not interested in pushing a Cruiserweight division. And even though they have a Cruiserweight division now, many would say that they're not interested in pushing one. So that was part of what made TNA different in those early days, was the X Division. And really what really gave the X Division kind of its identity was the flip-floppy stuff and the action and the great athleticism that these guys were capable of. So it was kind of the second coming of the Cruiserweight division that was so famous in WCW. And like I said, a lot of guys came out of that division. Jay Lethal, who's the current Ring of Honor World Heavyweight Champion. I could sit here all day and list all the great talents that came out of the X Division and performed very well in the X Division. So it's looked back on as a major positive on TNA's history. So why am I doing a what went wrong with the X Division? Well, as like the law of gravity, what goes up must come down, and that's especially true in TNA's history. You know, what was once great almost inevitably turns out to be dog shit eventually. So things go wrong, and then the whole empire just crumbles, and you're just kind of left with something that's a shell of its former self. And right now, I think many fans would agree, even the loyal Impact Wrestling fans would agree that the X Division is not what it once was, and it's nowhere near as good as it used to be, even though right now you've got talents like Pentagon and Phoenix and various other guys, Rich Swann, just to name a few. Matt Sydal, who's been around forever. I feel like that dude's been around forever, but you've got talented guys, so it's not like necessarily like a lack of talent, but there are a bunch of things that kind of knock the X Division off its pedestal, and the company has had a very hard time trying to reestablish it and getting it back to what it once was. And they haven't fully succeeded in that. There have been moments of greatness, like Austin Aries bringing in Option C, where the winner of the X Division title could cash in, basically turn it into the Money in the Belt championship, where they could use it to cash in and get a world title shot. Things like that, but overall, the X Division is not what it once was. It isn't the high level, you know, it isn't the thing that defines Impact Wrestling like it used to be back in the day. And I think a lot of things contributed to its downfall, and there are several points that I want to make to kind of highlight what I'm talking about here. Probably the most obvious for a lot of people is that they kind of, especially around that 2005, 2006 era, they put all their eggs in the AJ Styles, Christopher Danielsson, Samoa Joe basket. And then all of those guys moved on to different things. AJ and Daniels went on to form a tag team and took the tag team division by storm, had excellent tag team matches. I mean, their stuff with AMW and their stuff with LAX, I still think are some of the best matches that TNA ever had. And Samoa Joe went on to move into the heavyweight ranks and have feuds with Christian Cage and Kurt Angle and ultimately win the world title at some point. And Samoa Joe's like a whole other thing. You know, people would say I could do a whole what went wrong on Samoa Joe and TNA, but that's a whole other. We're not even going to cover that today. I'll be here all night talking about that. But they, for a while, they were the top three guys in the X Division, having amazing matches. Obviously, there's the famous Unbreakable match, which was kind of their big bang heading into getting onto Spike TV. That was like their big, like, whoa, look at this match. Look what's coming to Spike TV. And I don't even think that's the best match that involved those three guys. I look back on like AJ and Samoa Joe at Turning Point 05 as one of my personal favorite matches in company history. I also thought Daniels and Joe had an amazing match on the first Thursday Night Impact, I think it was. And I thought that match was incredible. Very underrated and overlooked match. I think that one was very, very good. And AJ and Daniels wrestled each other like 9 million times. So it was almost always great with those two until it got to a point where they oversaturated it. But they had a ton of great matches as well. So, you know, those three guys really were kind of the gold standard of the X Division. And when they all moved out of the X Division and into different things, it was kind of like, all right, now it's time to replace those guys. And it's hard to fill that void right away. To use an example, the NXT Women's Division, when they moved up the Four Horsewomen, it's like, okay, you're taking Becky, you're taking Sasha, you're taking Charlotte, and then not long after that, they took Bayley. I was like, oh, okay, well then Carmella and Alexa Bliss will move up and kind of take those spots. And then they took Carmella and Alexa Bliss. It's like, oh my God, you're leaving them with nothing. What are you doing? Yeah, so they kind of drained the NXT Women's Division, and it wasn't until recently that they started like, okay, they're kind of getting back on track. They had Asuka and Ember Moon for a while, but they were kind of the only ones that were doing well. But now you have Shayna and Kairi Sane, and they're getting a bunch of girls flooded in there. Nikki Cross, Bianca Belair, and various others. So that division seems to be getting back on track. But once the X Division took AJ, Joe, and Daniels away, you know, you have the guys like the Chris Sabins and the Low Keys and various others that could move up, but it's hard to get him ready for that top spot and to get him up to the standard of what AJ, Joe, and Daniels were delivering on. I thought Low-Key and Chris Sabin had an amazing match at Bound for Glory 06, but it's hard to like get the bar that was already set very high with AJ, Joe, and Daniels. It's hard to reach that. And unfortunately, they were the guys that were starting to take over. Jay Lethal was part of that class as well. They were starting to take over when Vince Russo took the book. And it was like almost immediately you could sense that once Russo took the book in 06, the quality of the storylines for the X Division started to go down. They started trying to force gimmicks on the guys, and that's where Black Machismo Jay Lethal came about, which worked for him, but you also had Austin Aries playing Austin Starr, which was like a cheap, like Jesse Ventura knockoff, and that didn't really work. They had Sanjay Dutt playing the Guru, and that felt like a racial stereotype that didn't really work for anybody. I thought the paparazzi production stuff was great, but that started before Russo got there. I think, if I ever do a video on like the top 10 guys that TNA dropped the ball with, Alex Shelley is going to be on my list because they had a chance with him to have their own version of Chris Jericho, and I thought the stuff he did with Nash was top-notch, awesome stuff. And some of the best stuff that TNA ever did, and they just didn't ride with it. They thought Austin Starr was the better investment, and they went with him instead. I'm like, dude, they had something there with Shelley, and his chemistry with Nash was just, I mean, if you don't believe me, go and watch some of those old paparazzi production skits. I think they're some of the funniest things that TNA ever did. They could have done so much more, and Alex Shelley could have been so much more as a single star. Fortunately, they did put him in the Motor City Machine Guns with Chris Sabin, and they did really well, but I felt like there was a lot of potential there as a single star that never got tapped into, and it's really a shame. But so yeah, that was a major problem with the X Division, and even years after, they never really, you had Kazarian perform really well. You had the guys I've already mentioned, like the Chris Sabins, Jay Lethals, the Low Keys. You had some guys, but it just never quite lived up to that high quality that was set by AJ, Joe, and Daniels. And I think when people think of the X Division, they think of the glory days of the X Division, their minds immediately go to AJ, Joe, and Daniels. And there was just nothing that quite lived up to it. Now, part of that might be bad booking. Part of that might be a heavier focus on the heavyweight division, because that was around the time that Kurt Angle and Sting and Christian Cage and oh God, look at how many big stars TNA used to have. Kevin Nash and various other guys started showing up. So it was, it really did feel like they put all their eggs for their, all their X Division eggs into the AJ, Joe, and Daniels basket. They never really fully recaptured that, with a few glimpses of greatness here and there, but never quite to the degree of what those three guys were able to accomplish. Another reason that I feel the X Division kind of lost its way, and this is something that I've talked about constantly, but it's the fact that they never had an identity for the division, and that's been the case since the very beginning. And what do I mean by an identity? They never, okay, if I ask 10 different people who watch TNA and are fully familiar with it, if I ask them what the X Division actually is, I might get 10 different answers, because it's like, okay, some people might tell me it's a cruiserweight division, which it kind of was marketed as a cruiserweight division, but it might also, some people might say it's like, no, it's not about weight limits, it's about no limits, it's about high quality action and backflips and moonsaults and all that other stuff. And I'm like, well, Kurt Angle and Jeff Hardy can do flips off the top rope, so what's the difference between the world title match and the X Division title match? And AJ Styles moved into the heavyweight ranks, so what's the difference between the two? There's and I know that Bruce Pritchard and Eric Bischoff, I believe as well, have talked about this as far as the X Division goes, but it never had a fully fleshed out identity or a definition of what it meant to be the X Division. A cruiserweight division, there's a weight limit. You know exactly what it is. It's the guys that are, nowadays it's 205 pounds or less. Back in the day it used to be 225, but I think the light heavyweight division in WWE initially was like 215 or something like, but there was like, okay, there's a cutoff point for the weight limit, and it's those guys that are competing in the division. Okay, makes sense, easy to understand, okay, I get it. But TNA never had that because, again, it was always about, it was never about weight limits, it was about no limits. And then you look at guys who've held the belt, and it's like the X Division Championship belt, Samoa Joe. Now, Samoa Joe, especially at that time, amazing worker, and I already put his work over in the X Division, but how does a big fat guy fit into a division with a bunch of cruiserweights? How does Sonny Siaki, and again, I'm not shitting on these guys, but Sonny Siaki was a former X Division champion, and it's like, how does he fit? He doesn't do moonsaults or anything like that. So stylistically, he doesn't even fit in. Abyss is a former X Division champion. It's like, what the hell? That doesn't make any sense. Brian Cage, who I'm a huge fan of Brian Cage. Don't get me wrong. I think he's Lucha Lesnar. I think he's terrific. I loved his work in Lucha Underground. I think he's one of the better guys in Impact Wrestling today. But he's the X Division champion, right? Well, he's cashing it in to get a world title shot. But and I wouldn't. I wouldn't be against him winning the world title, but it's like, how does he get an X Division title? How does one become like X Division champion? Bobby Lashley is a former X Division champion. Kurt Angle's a former X Division champion. So what does it mean to be in the X Division? How does one qualify to be in the X Division? And what truly separates the X Division from everything else? And not as like you can't, oh, well, I feel like it's this, or it's a feeling that you get when you watch the X Division match over something else. There has to be something concrete that clearly defines it, and that's something that this company, even through the really good days of the X Division, was never successfully able to do. And I've used this example before, and I'm going to use it again. One of the things I liked about the Ring of Honor Pure title, that I seem to be the only person that liked, was that, all right, anybody who competes for this championship has to fight under these set rules. And it's just, you understand that a pure title match has these rules. The 20, I'm trying to remember what it was. It was like 3 rope breaks and countouts. There was some rule about the countouts. I don't remember exactly what it was, but there was a distinct rule structure for the pure title matches that set it apart from the World Heavyweight title. So you knew you were getting a different kind of match, and the guys that wrestled for that belt wrestled under a different discipline, a different style. Like tag team wrestling. It's like tag team wrestling comes with a completely different set of rules than singles wrestling, and that's understood. Triple threat matches come with a completely different set of rules. Well, almost completely different set of rules from singles wrestling or tag wrestling. So that was something that the X Division was never able to do. They were never able to completely commit to an identity. And I know during the Hogan and Bischoff era, they tried putting a weight limit on it, which I was completely fine with. It's like, look, it gives it a definition. But that didn't stick, unfortunately. And another thing they tried to do was change the rule structure where it was like this weird triple threat match setting where it's like, all right, if you compete in the X Division, you fight in triple threat matches, and every match is for the title. And it was really weird. I think it was like, if you win the triple threat match, you get put into the triple threat match for the title, and if you lose the title match, then you get moved down to the contenders match. And it was like this weird cycle of triple threat matches that was very awkward and never really clicked. But at least it was but at least they're trying to define some kind of a rule structure for this thing that makes sense. So I respect the effort. It just wasn't fully thought out. It wasn't, and unfortunately, if you have all triple threat matches, that basically takes storylines and throws it out the window because you can't really have strong storylines with that type of rule structure in place. So that didn't work either. And then it just, once that idea failed, once the weight class kind of got thrown away, then it just kind of went back to being random. It's like, all right, whoever holds the X Division title is the X Division champion, blah, 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 whatever. And, and that's something I wish they would fix with the X Division even today. It's like, look, either make it a cruiserweight division or find some way to separate it from the other titles in the company. Especially, a lot of the things I'm talking about, this was during a time when they had a TV title. And it was like, well, what's the difference between the X Division and the TV title? It's like, there's just But the only things that any fan could ever tell me was that, well, it's about the action. It's like, well, but if Abyss can be the champion and Angle can be the champion, and Sting could probably be the X Division champion. Doesn't fucking matter. So really what I would like Impact Wrestling to do in 2019, which they're not going to do, but, you know, I'm just throwing ideas out there, find some way to set the X Division, or to define an X Division athlete away from the heavyweight ranks. And maybe they could do something like an X Division athletic challenge or something like that to qualify for the X Division. You have to have some kind of athletic credential or pass some kind of athletic test. And these are things that they could film on their own, like show somebody doing like 10 moonsaults in a row or something. Like, I don't know. Like, you have to be able to do a shooting star press onto this, like this X spot on the ring or whatever. And you know, I'm just coming up with ideas, and these are things that they could cook up and film on their own. And if you pass this athletic challenge, then you qualify for the X Division. You can compete for the X Division title. Like things like that could really set the X Division apart from everything else and actually give it that identity that it's sorely lacked. Because up until this point, the X Division has largely been identified by the people in it, like the AJ Styles, like the Samoa Joes, like the Christopher Daniels, like the Chris Sabins, like the Low Keys, like the Jay Lethals, Jerry Lynn, and Amazing Red, and all those other guys. So that's something I wish they could fix and actually make it a division or something, or go the Ring of Honor pure title route and have the X Division matches wrestled under different rules. Whatever those rules are, that's up to those. That's up to the creative minds at Impact Wrestling. But anything to kind of set it apart, because for right now it just feels like a random mishmash that we're supposed to like just kind of assume it's like, well, it's a cruiserweight division, but it's really not. And I think years and years of not having a clear-cut identity kind of opened the doors for bad booking and bizarre people holding the title that probably should have never held the title, and a bunch of the other things that kind of dragged the division down. In addition to all the other problems, I mean, that's another thing. The X Division got plagued by a lot of the problems that plagued TNA and Impact Wrestling as a whole, and they suffered right along with everything else. So, but the last thing I want to talk about as far as what kind of knocked the X Division down, and it's a problem that I talk about with all of pro wrestling, especially in the WWE, but that's oversaturation. The X Division was something that caught on with the fan base early on and was a major talking point for TNA in its early days. Even before I started watching it in 2004, I had heard so much about the X Division, that's all anybody was like raving about, was this goddamn X Division. And oddly enough, when I started watching in 04, it was actually the tag division that won me over. I'm like, yeah, these cruiserweight guys are great, but I really dig this tag division. AMW and Team Canada and Triple X and the Naturals, and it's like, oh my god, they have a tag division, it's great. Back at the time when WWE was not at all concerned about pushing a tag division in any kind of serious manner. So that was what won me over to TNA initially. But the X Division was a major attraction for them and was what kind of got their foot in the door. And unfortunately, it's that thing where if the audience likes something, you give them more. And I've always been a believer of less is more, and I think the X Division was something that got kind of oversaturated. Nothing exemplifies that more than the Ultimate X match, which should have been TNA's like signature gimmick match. And many would say that it is their signature gimmick match, but this should have been something on par with like Hell in a Cell or like the ladder match or something like that, like this iconic match that is unique to the promotion and no one else. Well, I guess the ladder match is something that's been passed around, but like Hell in a Cell is unique to WWE. The Elimination Chamber is unique to WWE. War Games was unique to WCW. Ultimate X should have been unique to TNA and should have been like this amazing thing that, and here's the key here, this amazing thing that they only used when they needed it. Unfortunately, the Ultimate X, they did it way too many times. And that match was created and first done in 2003. I think they've done like 45 of them. And like, you know, in 15 years to do 45, or actually, let me see if I can pull it up, get the exact number. Let's consult Wikipedia. I don't want to get my stats wrong. Let's switch to the specs so I can read this. Ultimate X match, Wikipedia. They have done 41. They have done 41 of these matches. Oh my God, the last one was in 07, so they at least took a break. That's great. Number 42 will be taking place at Homecoming, so at least it's been a while since they've done one. But, the Ultimate X, if you want to make something uncool, just do it over and over and over again until it becomes mundane and kind of regular and far less special. And they took the Ultimate X and they just burned it into the ground. I think in the first year, they'd already done 4 of them, 3 or 4. And it's like, guys, this should be like a once in a blue moon type of thing. But again, they were just kind of like desperate for anything. The fans liked it, so they just kept doing it more and more and more and more and more until it became less special. Lockdown is another one of those great examples where, they ruined the steel cage match for their own company. And they just oversaturated themselves. And I think the X Division is one of those things that kind of, they pushed it too much, especially early on with all these other things like the World X Cup and the Destination X pay-per-view and a bunch of other things that they did, until they pushed it really hard until all of a sudden they weren't pushing it at all. And it was just kind of like, all of a sudden it was the hottest thing in the world and it was like dominating the shows. And then out of nowhere it was like, they pulled the rug out from under it, and obviously like AJ, Joe, and Daniels moving on had a lot to do with that. But it was like this oversaturated thing until they decided to stop putting major focus onto it. But they kept doing like Ultimate X matches, and that was kind of the problem with the later Ultimate X matches. It was just something that they did, is like, oh, let's just put a spot fest on the pay-per-view. And that's all the thought that went into it. And it's a damn shame, because the Ultimate X is something that should have stayed special and should have been protected, when really, like, out of the 41 they've done, I think maybe 5 or 6 of them are even worth like going out of your way to see. Maybe like the first one, the second one, maybe the fourth one, which was the first one I saw, the one in Final Resolution 05, AJ and Daniels versus LAX, and maybe like 2 or 3 other ones. But for the most part, like, they just burned Ultimate X into the ground and rendered it no longer special or unique, and killed their own gimmick. And that kind of summarizes the X Division as a whole. They killed their own gimmick, and it's a shame, but and that's not a knock on the current crop of talents that they have, and it's certainly not a knock on Brian Cage, who I like. It's just all those problems with the X Division after so many years of mishandling it kind of led to what you have now, which is very now, while it's better now than it maybe was, say, last year, it's still not great, and there's plenty of room for improvement. And I think maybe not doing the Ultimate X over and over again, maybe not, or maybe just giving the Ultimate X matches, or giving the X Division matches themselves like a different rule structure for these guys to follow, or some way to set it apart from the other divisions will go a long way towards making it mean something a little bit more again, and maybe reignite it and make it more exciting. And because I think they've got some solid talents in there to help, like Pentagon and Phoenix. Like, Phoenix is tailor-made for the X Division, the whole no limits thing, but they've got a lot of problems to fix in the division first. So that concludes this What Went Wrong. And again, that's kind of what I want to do with this series as far as What Went Wrong goes. I don't want to point at things that were obviously bad. I want to point at things that maybe could have been good, or maybe could have been better than what they were, or things that could have worked really well and ultimately didn't. So, but yeah, this is, I guess, my video to celebrate Impact Wrestling's homecoming to Nashville, Tennessee next month. But I am excited for that pay-per-view, and I think the card looks really good. So I will do a preview of that show before 2018 is up, and I will do a review of it, because I'm definitely watching it next year. But that concludes this What Went Wrong. Let's move on to all the other junk I wanted to do in this video. Now, before I dive into the top 10 matches for November 2018 and close out with a couple of pay-per-view previews, I want to pay my respects to the Dynamite Kid, who passed away earlier today. I saw that news headline being passed around, and I was like, oh man, there's another one. Dynamite, by all accounts, was not the nicest guy in the world behind the scenes, but on screen, as a worker, I think he was way ahead of its time, and very influential on a lot of the talents that would follow. Especially if you look into the 90s and the evolution of in-ring work in pro wrestling. I think Dynamite Kid, being as advanced as he was back in the 80s, he obviously influenced a lot of people and definitely left his mark on pro wrestling. And being a fan of tag team wrestling, he was one half of the British Bulldogs, one of the best tag teams of the 1980s. So wanted to pay my respects and make sure that as a fan, I expressed my gratitude towards him as a worker and the type of talent that he was and the impact that he left on pro wrestling. So unfortunate news, but now that we've got the bad news out of the way, let's jump into some really good stuff. Wanted to do my top 10 matches for the month of November 2018. The last top 10 before I do the best ofs. I'll do a top 10 matches for 2018 at the end of the month, right before I take my holiday break. But we've got November 2018 to work with here, and there were a lot of selections for me to work with, and it was a very hard list to make, but this is what I settled on. Number 10, Brock Lesnar versus Daniel Bryan at WWE Survivor Series 2018. Started slow, but once it picked up, it got really, really good and really showed what Lesnar is capable of when he's a little bit more creative and when he works hard. And Daniel Bryan, this is probably his best performance since he came back to in-ring competitions. So really good match, great closer, very enjoyable. The Suplex City stuff was a little dry and felt very repetitive, but once they got past that, it became a really good match. Number 9, Buddy Murphy versus Mustafa Ali for the Cruiserweight title from that same pay-per-view, Survivor Series 2018. It was just a nice, good, solid Cruiserweight match, and they don't get to do that very often, especially on co-branded shows, main roster shows. The 205 Live guys typically don't get to shine like this when Raw and SmackDown are here to play. So to see them get this type of match and have it be as good as it was, I'm like, yeah, good for them. Good for the Cruiserweights. They get to shine a little bit. Number 8, Johnny Mundo versus Matanza Cueto in a Sacrifice to the Gods match from Ultima Lucha Cuatro Part 2. I said in my review of Ultima Lucha Cuatro, and I'll say it here, I think this match is this is the most Lucha Underground-y match ever, where it's just so over the top and so ridiculous, and the whole thing is centered around obtaining the magical gauntlet to get Johnny Mundo the powers he needs to topple the unbeatable monster possessed by a god. It's just over the top and really highlights everything that Lucha Underground is all about, and was very entertaining. From start to finish. A very enjoyable match. So if you're a fan of Lucha Underground, this match is definitely a must-see. Number 7, Chris Jericho versus Evil for the IWGP IC title from Power Struggle 2018. Really good match. Possibly the best match I've ever seen Evil have. And it was good to see Jericho actually defend the IC title, work a match, and it was nice to see him get a successful title defense in before he probably drops the title to Naito at Wrestle Kingdom, but we'll see what happens there. But overall, I thought this was a really solid match. Number 6, Tomasso Ciampa versus the Velveteen Dream for the NXT title from NXT TakeOver War Games. Very good match that by the end of it, I thought, oh my God, Velveteen Dream might actually win the title. He didn't, but as is, I thought it was a very exciting match between two of the hottest talents in NXT today. Number 5, Tomohiro Ishii versus Minoru Suzuki for the British Heavyweight title at Power Struggle 2018. Two of the legit toughest, most badass guys in wrestling beating the shit out of each other. That's all it was. That was all I wanted out of it, and it delivered. I thought this was a very cool match. Number 4, Marty the Moth Martinez versus Pentagon Dark for the Lucha Underground title in a Cero Miedo match. The main event of Ultima Lucha Cuatro Part 2. Well, you know, it wouldn't be the last match. It's, Jake Strong would cash in his title shot against Pentagon right afterwards. But I thought this was a wild, violent, and crazy match and really highlighted what both guys are really capable of. Again, very violent, very grisly, very graphic, but excellent match and really captured the best elements of both guys. Marty, I think, is one of the most underrated workers in the business. I think he's everything that Lucha Underground has ever given him, he's taken and just hit a home run with it. And Pentagon Dark is just, you know, Pentagon Jr., whichever you like to call him, he's just the man. So I was expecting a great match out of these two, and they delivered a great match. Number 3, Aleistair Black versus Johnny Gargano in NXT TakeOver War Games 2018. I thought maybe they were doing this match a little bit too soon. I was really surprised that Black went over, given that Johnny just turned heel. But with those restrictions in place, I thought they had a very good match with each other. That was the best thing on the War Games TakeOver event. I thought it was very, very good and very enjoyable match between arguably NXT's two most talented workers. I thought they delivered very well. Number 2, the Mack versus Muertes in a death match from Ultima Lucha Cuatro Part 2. This was a great, very violent, but also like a great underdog comes from behind and beats the unstoppable monster match. I thought that story was told very, very well. It was very satisfying to see the Mack ultimately win and defeat Muertes. So, yeah, these two went out there and had an excellent match, and I thought stole the show at Ultima Lucha Cuatro on a show that was very, very good. I thought they had the best match. So kudos to them. I thought it was excellent. And my number one favorite match of the month might surprise people, but I'm going to give it to the Alpha Club, Chris Jericho and the Young Bucks, or what else were they calling themselves? The Bucks of Jericho or something like that? Anyway, the Alpha Club versus the Bullet Club, Cody Rhodes, Hangman Page, and the villain Marty Scurll. This was the main event of Chris Jericho's Rock and Wrestling Rager at Sea. I watched this on the Fight app, and I really enjoyed the show. The setting was great, where it was just so amazing to me. It's like, oh my God, they're actually holding a wrestling show on a cruise ship while it's at the ocean, because you can see like the water in the background and everything. It's just such a unique way to present a wrestling show, and I would have thought, man, could you imagine, like, what if they get motion sickness or something, or what if, you know, like, what if something happens and the boat jerks and that causes them to throw off their timing in the match or something. I don't know. But everything seemed to come off really well, and I thought this main event, the six-man tag, was very exciting, very good, and well worth the price tag that I paid for the show. So excellent stuff all around. Great month of wrestling, personally. I thought all around. You look at NXT, New Japan, Lucha Underground, and even WWE Survivor Series was not terrible. There was a lot of stuff to enjoy this month. So I was a really happy wrestling fan in November. I'm going to give Brand of the Month to Lucha Underground. I thought they really came on strong at the end of Season 4, and I thought Ultima Lucha Cuatro was very, very good. And a great way to end the season, and made me excited. Again, fingers crossed, here's hoping we get a Season 5. So all of that was very good, and I really enjoyed every match on this list. But Lucha Underground gets my nod for Brand of the Month. So now that I've got that out of the way, let's do some pay-per-view previews. I should probably save these for next week, but since I'm going to be in Tampa most of next week, I don't know if I'm going to have time to do this. So I'm going to do preview and predictions for Ring of Honor Final Battle 2018, which I am definitely watching because I'm hosting a party with a couple of wrestling fan friends, and we're going to be watching it here in the apartment. So that should be fun. And a show I'm not sure if I'm going to watch yet, TLC Tables, Ladders, and Chairs 2018. So I'm going to go over both cards and give my previews and predictions, and we'll see how everything goes when the shows happen next week. So let's start with TLC, since I actually don't know what the card is because I haven't been watching. Okay. All right, match number one, again, I'm pulling from the Wikipedia page. Match number one is the Finals to the Mixed Match Challenge, where the winning team will be the last entrant in their respective Rumbles. Ooh, that's all right. At least the prize is interesting. So I guess they're doing 2 Royal Rumbles again this year. Okay. I have never watched Mixed Match Challenge. I know the Alexa Bliss, Braun Strowman pairing really got over in season 1, but I've never, like, a bunch of mixed tag matches is not something that not overly interesting to me, if that makes any sense. It's just like, I don't need a bunch of intergender matches. I'm good. Like, there's nothing there. There's no attraction there that really appeals to me. It makes me go, ooh, I want to check that out. But at least the winner of the tournament gets something, and it's like, all right, that's something tangible. Something that Survivor Series in its Raw versus SmackDown setting was missing. So we actually don't have the participants yet, because I guess the semifinal still has to happen. Right now we've got Jinder Mahal and Alicia Fox versus Finn Balor and Bayley. And the other brackets, it's R-Truth and Carmella versus The Miz and Asuka. My guess is it'll probably be Finn Balor and Bayley versus Miz and Asuka in the finals, if I had to guess. Probably with the heels going over, or, well, I guess, is Asuka even a heel at this point? I don't even know. Who the hell knows? But I'll go ahead and pick Miz and Asuka to win it, even though I could even be wrong. They may not even make it to the final, so who knows? But it could just as easily be Baylor and Bayley, because they've made it clear they're not keen on protecting Asuka or making her like the unbeatable force she was in NXT. So, for the Intercontinental title, we've got Seth Rollins versus Dean Ambrose. Didn't they just have a cage match at Starrcade? I didn't watch the Starrcade special that they did, but didn't they have a cage match on that? How do you go from a cage match to a regular match? That doesn't make any sense. Doesn't make sense. Anyway, I'll pick Dean Ambrose to win the title, just to continue his heel run and give him something to do. I don't know. Next up, we have a tables, ladders, and chairs match. Braun Strowman versus Baron Corbin? What the fuck? If Strowman wins, Corbin will be stripped of all authoritative power, and Strowman will receive a Universal Championship match at the Royal Rumble. If Corbin wins, he will become a full-time general manager of Raw. Jesus Christ, who cares? I'll pick Strowman to win, but I hopefully they keep that one short. Because I don't see that working. I would just have Strowman kill him. For the Raw Women's title, we've got Ronda Rousey versus Nia Jax. Ronda will definitely go over. I do not see them rewarding Nia for breaking Becky Lynch's face by giving her the first big victory over Ronda Rousey. I would be very surprised if they did that. But yeah, don't care too much about that match other than that. For the WWE Championship, we have Daniel Bryan versus AJ Styles. This should be good. I didn't see the match where Bryan won the title, so this will be... this will be my first time watching the match if I decide to watch the pay-per-view. This should be pretty good. Yeah. That's all I got to say. It should be pretty good. I don't think Bryan will lose the title here. I don't see the point of putting it on him just to put it right back on AJ. So I'm pretty sure Bryan's going to retain here. They didn't over-gimmick this pay-per-view by the look of it. I'm a little surprised by that. Pleasantly so. I mean, they have 2 TLC matches, but they didn't, go overboard. It's like, we got to have a ladder match, and a chairs match, and a tables match, and a TLC match. They actually, kept the dog on its leash this year to some degree. The second TLC match is a triple threat for the SmackDown Women's Championship. Becky Lynch versus Charlotte Flair versus Asuka. Oh, so I guess Asuka's not going to win the... Okay, so I changed my prediction. All right, so it's going to be R-Truth and Carmella and Finn Balor and Bayley in the finals, with Finn Balor and Bayley winning the mixed match challenge. Okay, because Asuka, I highly doubt that Asuka's going to be pulling double duty. So yeah, I got those 3. Asuka doesn't feel right to be in that match because they've just handled her so poorly that it doesn't feel like she belongs in there with Flair and Lynch. And I would have preferred just a one-on-one because Lynch and Flair, they've had their storyline going and they finally developed Lynch into the character she should have been all along. And Flair had that massive heel turn at Survivor Series, so I think that I would have just done a one-on-one. But I think this could, based on this card, this should be the match of the night, I would think. Should be really good. Again, one would hope, but we'll see. Next up, we've got Finn Balor versus Drew McIntyre. That could be a sleeper hit. That could be a solid match. I'll pick Drew to go over. Oh, and in the women's match, I'll pick Becky Lynch to retain because she's red hot right now. You got to run with Becky. I don't think Asuka has any chance of winning it. I could see Flair winning it now that she's turned heel and they make Becky the chaser, but I'll pick Lynch to retain. Well, no, maybe because they may want to do Flair and Ronda again at WrestleMania, so might be, I don't know, maybe Flair will win. I don't know, we'll see. But anyway, Finn Balor versus Drew McIntyre, that could be a solid match. I would have Drew go over, but just because there's something there with him, and everybody's telling me he's been really good, so, keep that ball rolling, I guess. Then we got Elias versus Bobby Lashley. It's nice that they turned Elias face. I'll pick Lashley to go over, but yeah, maybe that could be okay. I don't know. It's nice to have some undercard matches that actually makes it look like they've got some depth. And a triple threat match for the SmackDown Tag Team Championship. What? No ladder match? I'm shocked. The Bar versus the New Day versus the Usos. I feel like we've seen that match before. Didn't they do that match on another pay-per-view? Am I forgetting something? Again, it's what you expect out of the New Day, the Usos, and the Bar. When it's probably the match I've seen 100 times, but it won't be bad. So, yeah. I'll pick the Bar to retain. Although I guess it could go either way. So yeah, that's TLC card. Not a terrible card. Not great, but it's not terrible. The only thing on there that has me scratching my head is the Strowman-Corbin match. I'm like, really? That got the gimmick match? Does that need to be a gimmick match? I don't know. You could have just had the one TLC. I think it would have been fine. But anyway, yeah, I might be checking that show out. We'll see, depending on what my schedule is like. But let's close this out by talking about ROH's final pay-per-view of 2018, Final Battle. This card looks awesome. I am totally on board with this one. Starting off, we've got, for the Women of Honor Championship, we've got Sumi Sakai defending against Madison Rayne, Karen Q, and Kelly Klein in a four corners match. Good God Almighty, put the belt on Kelly Klein. That's all I'm going to say about this. Put the belt on Kelly Klein. Get it off of Sumi, because she's just not working as champion. I'm sorry. It's just... I mean, the Women of Honor, they're like, it's the weakest part of the product right now. And I think getting it on a different title holder would really help things out. So it's like, you've had your Roma Sumi, now I think it's time to go with Kelly Klein. We've got Matt Taven versus Matt Castle. Very interesting they didn't rush Lethal versus Taven to determine who's the true Ring of Honor champion. This is Dalton Castle's big return match following his injury. I mean, he's had a couple of matches since, but this is his first big like singles match on a pay-per-view since he's come back. And Matt Taven is doing his thing where he's the true Ring of Honor champion, walking around with the purple belt. So I'm going to go with Taven to win and ultimately set him up for Jay Lethal down the road. Maybe even Cody, depending on how the main event goes. But yeah, this one should be interesting. And I'm really digging Matt Taven right now, so I think there's a huge upside to him. Next up, we've got a singles match to determine the #1 contender for the Ring of Honor World title. Christopher Daniels versus Marty Scurll, with Christopher Daniels trying to keep his job in Ring of Honor. If he doesn't win this match, this could be his final match in Ring of Honor. I mean, with that stipulation in place, it could go either way. I'm going to go with Marty to win it. But I don't know. Is Daniels thinking about retiring at this point? It'll be interesting. I'm going to pick Marty to go over here, but because I think that tells a more interesting story. It's like, oh God, he's lost his last match, and now Daniels doesn't have a contract. Oh no. Because SCU, their new contract is only for Scorpio Sky and Kazarian, so Daniels is kind of on the outside looking in. So it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out. But I think this could be like a very interesting match, and if Daniels loses, I think you got potential for a huge, like dramatic, like gut punch, which is not a bad thing. We've got this big singles match. Jonathan Gresham going up against Zack Sabre Jr. Always a treat to see Zack Sabre Jr. This could probably even be the opening match. I'll pick Zack Sabre Jr. to go over just because he's a much bigger star than Jonathan Gresham is when you look at the current wrestling scene. But I expect this to be a really good match, especially if they position it as the opener. I think it could be really good. For the Ring of Honor TV title, we've got Jeff Cobb taking on Adam Page. This could be really good as well. I think Cobb is doing really well as kind of this bruiser champion that's beating the hell out of everybody, and Adam Page has improved leaps and bounds in 2018, and there's a huge upside to him. So I expect this to be kind of a sleeper hit, a nice hard-hitting match. But I think he just won the title, so you keep going with Cobb as the unbeatable champion. So I'm going to pick Cobb to retain the title here. And one of the big grudge matches on the show, we've got Bully Ray taking on Flip Gordon in an I Quit match, which will probably be the feud ender to their long-running feud that's been going on for most of the year now. Flip Gordon is going to get the win here, get the big win over Bully Ray, and the good guy will triumph over the heel finally. And yeah, I expect this to be really good and really satisfying. I've enjoyed the feud. It's so funny to me that a lot of the reviews I've read have really shit on it. I'm like, I think the feud's been really, really good. But okay, and it's like they're setting up Flip to get the big win over Bully. Now, if Bully goes over here, I think that kind of kills it. I think Flip needs to get the win here. So that's one that I would definitely, yeah, I'm going to look for Bully to take the loss, say I quit, and give Flip Gordon his big win here. And I think all that's left are the two main events. Is that right? Did I get them all? Yep. All right, for the, I'll save the gimmick match for last, but for the Ring of Honor World title, we've got Jay Lethal defending against Cody. This will be very interesting with all the rumors of the Elite leaving New Japan and leaving Ring of Honor, going to WWE, forming their own company, the Elite... What's it called? The Elite Wrestling Federation or whatever it's called. I forget what the actual acronym is. All those rumors flying around and working with Jericho and Jim Ross and all sorts of crazy stuff, which I'm not going to comment on until we get something more concrete. But with all of that in place, it'll be very interesting to see who goes over here. I'm going to go with Lethal to retain, but if Cody goes over, that'll be very interesting. And maybe nothing is going to happen. It's all just online rumor and speculation. Who knows? But yeah, if Cody goes over, I think there could be something really, really interesting in play as well. So, but yeah, I'm gonna count on Lethal retaining, but I think it should be a really good match. I really enjoyed the matches these two had the first time they feuded. Their bull rope match was really good. So now we've got the Ring of Honor World title in play, and I think this could be a really good match. But the match that seems to be positioned as the main event, or if I had to guess, was probably going to be the closing match. It's going to be Ladder War 7 for the Ring of Honor World Tag Team Championship. See what I was talking about earlier? Ring of Honor they did the first ladder war in what, 2000, like somewhere like 2008, 2010, I think. And in that time frame, this is only the 7th one they've done. I'm just saying, you don't have to overload your gimmick matches. You didn't need to do Ultimate X 41 times, TNA. I'm just saying. Didn't have to have a whole pay-per-view of steel cage matches. WWE, you don't have to oversaturate your gimmick matches all the fucking time. You just save it for when you need it. And now that they've saved it for when they needed it, this kind of feels like a big deal. So we've got SoCal Uncensored, Frankie Kazarian and Scorpio Sky defending the Ring of Honor tag titles in the ladder war against the Briscoes and the Young Bucks, the 3 teams that are unquestionably the 3 best teams in the company right now. The ones that have been feuding for most of the year. The Ring of Honor show I attended, the best match on the show was the Briscoes versus the Bucks. And the Briscoes have been feuding with SCU for a title shot that played into All In and all of that stuff. They had the pre-show match where SCU got the win, and SCU ultimately took the tag titles away from the Briscoes. So it's like, yeah, these are the 3 best teams in the company right now. So you're giving them a big platform, big gimmick, big stipulation, and I think, the ladder match lends itself to kind of crazy spot fest, so I think this match could be absolutely insane and could be really good. And hey, we've got, over the course of a weekend, we've got 2 TLC matches and the big ladder war. So if you're a ladder match fan, next weekend has got you covered. But, yeah, I think the card for Final Battle looks amazing, and I hope it delivers, because I think this could be Ring of Honor's best show of the year, if everything goes well. But that is all I have for you here. Thank you all for watching. I will try to get a video out to you guys before I leave for Tampa. If not, I'll resume when I get back Wednesday night. It's going to be, the next couple of weeks are going to be really, really crazy for me. And I hope to get all of my video projects knocked out before Christmas weekend, or the weekend before Christmas, but we'll see if I'm able to accomplish that. And I need you guys in my corner. I need you guys to cheer for me and to keep me going. But that is all I have for you now. You all have a good night. Enjoy the rest of your week, and I'll see you all later.